podcast listeners. It's another week of the show, and I'm so glad that you are here. Oh, it has been quite a week on my end of things. Again, welcome to the show. This is JOANNA WHALEY podcast. For those who are joining live, welcome to the podcast. For those who are listening any other time, welcome to the podcast. A couple programming notes today. This really is for the live audience, but I'm going to do things a little different. I'm trying new things on the show here. And one of the things I'm doing is I will be taking calls again today, people on the show live who want to chat with me, but I'm going to be doing that off the air today. I'm going to be doing that for our bonus content. So I'm going to be sharing some thoughts with you here live on the show. Before we get started, if you are an LGBTQ person or an ally, or maybe you're a parent of a queer kid and you need support, you can go to patreon.com/JOANNA WHALEY. And for as little as $1 a month, you can join and get bonus content and also get direct access to me for some spiritual care one-on-one. Another way you can do that if you don't want to join a monthly thing, you can go to JOANNAWHALEY.com/support. There's all kinds of ways to get connected with me. There's that. The business is out of the way. Let's talk, friends. Welcome to the show. I don't know if you have been living under a rock, but for the last couple of weeks, there have been hurricanes hitting our country like crazy. Where I'm recording this, I live in the United States of America. I don't live in Florida, but I have a lot of family and friends who live in Florida. And in the last 2 weeks, there have been two huge, major hurricanes that have hit our country and devastated homes and families and livelihoods, and retirements are ruined by this thing, right? This horrific thing has happened. But if you're like me, quick story, I was an evangelical pastor for about 20 years before I came out as a trans person. And in that time as an evangelical pastor, I gained a lot of friends in the religious community on social media. Okay. A lot of friends who want to talk, who wanted to follow my life when I was like a straight male pastor, and by the thousands, right? Like by the thousands, people follow my social media, mostly from, and it's beginning to shift now, but mostly from very conservative, religious backgrounds and religious beliefs. And one of the things that I've seen over the last 2 weeks is this whole mess of people using Jesus and using religion to totally try to explain these terrible things that are happening in the hurricanes in the world. I mean, my social media feeds are filled with it. I mean, somebody didn't believe me the other day. One of my coworkers was like, no, I haven't seen any of that. And I just shared one thing, and it was like, and it's always an AI image of some kind, right? But just people sharing Bible passages of God's judgment against our world through hurricanes, through storms, through all these things. And this is incredibly frustrating. It can be so frustrating when you scroll and you see people of faith, people who have religious conviction, repeating things that dehumanize entire communities of people, all in the hopes for validation, all in the hopes to get maybe 10 likes, all in the hopes of maybe getting a comment. I need to tell you that this is not a spiritual reality. Many people are sharing things online in hopes of impressing the echo chamber. But none of it is rooted in in theology, in sound spiritual ideas. It all comes from, Spider Trump says people are messed up. Agreed. But I want to talk to you today about this idea that in that frustration, like in all of that frustration, when we see people, if you're like me, you left a certain religious belief because who I am, who I'm attracted to, was not okay with my religion. And so I was cast out. But you have tons of networks of people who agree, who like share these things that are so insensitive, and using your spirituality and using spirituality in general to speak to groups of people and tell them that because this storm came and wiped out your house, it's some sort of spiritual reason or punishment. If you're like me, it's really frustrating to watch. It's really frustrating to listen to and to see it over and over. And many people say, Joanna, why don't you just not listen to them? The thing is that it comes by the dozens and the dozens and the dozens at a time. It's like every 10 seconds I'm seeing something. And I want to submit to you all today that there is a spiritual practice that I have been engaging in. I've been using this new spiritual practice, and I mean this kind of in a funny way, but I really mean it. My current spiritual practice is hitting the block button. For real. My current spiritual practice, the thing that is bringing me some of the most life, is hitting the block button and unfollowing and saying, you know what? I don't need that in my life. I don't need to hear it. I don't need to see you posting that people's homes being flooded is some sort of judgment from God. I don't need it in my life. As a queer person, I've heard it over and over and over again. That because of, is it because of my queerness? Is it because I'm queer that God is sending hurricanes? I don't know, but that doesn't compute with my understanding of the divine. It really doesn't. And a lot of it is using the book and the Christian Bible of Revelation and saying that, like all of this is coming to fruition. But there's been a lot of things that have been shared in many areas that are some sort of biblical prophecy that are not actually in the book. Let me read you something that is in the book. Revelation 21, 5-6 says, I'm making a whole new creation, and it will come true, and it is already done. I am the Alpha, the Omega, both the beginning and the end. A whole new creation. You see, we sometimes miss the story of this book of Revelation, of biblical prophecy, and we like to package it up in some kind of meme to make a point. And it really is not helping those who you are friends with online. And if you're a queer person like me, every time you see someone share a Bible passage online, you start to think, what's going on here? What's going on here? Richard Rohr, one of my favorite theologians out there, he says, he discusses about how Revelation is a bookend of love. And how the story of Revelation is this coming from and moving towards love rather than this terrifying apocalyptic message. And as an LGBTQ person who is also a spiritual person, I love this theological take because it's understanding that it was for love that the divine created us. And it's all coming, and the bookend is that God is loving us, and not through hurricanes. I'm sorry. Do not tell me that a hurricane is a sign of God's return to earth. I see one of my dear friends on the live right now who literally went through 2 hurricanes. 2. And to say that what's happening is because of God's judgment? Because there's trans people in the world? Because there's queer people in the world? Because there's Democrats in office? No, friends. It's something called climate change. How's that for a spiritual reality? But many people are avoiding this thing, right? Many people are avoiding this idea of climate change because we're banning the dang books that talk about it. Alan Gratz is an author. Has 19 banned books. 19. Think about that. And one of his books is called 2 Degrees. And this book has been banned everywhere because people don't want to deal with the actual realities. It isn't that God is returning, it's that we are not changing. And what I want to do, I don't want to just complain about things. What I want to do is want to kind of draw us, as I did with Revelation. The book of Revelation is about love. It's about leading us to love. It's worth saying that the book of Revelation it has this socio-political context that's really important for us to understand. And that during the writing of this, it was against the backdrop of Roman imperial cult, culture. People were worshiping Rome. And that's when this book showed up. It's about imagery. It's about symbolism is what this book is about. It is not a literal thing that is going to happen. It's really important for us to understand. Let's get to climate change. As a queer person, I talked about this person who, Alan Gratz, that had, so many banned books in the world by this guy, right? Banned books are being targeted. Books are being targeted because of their ideas, because of climate, because of LGBTQ issues. And a lot of it is coming around this idea of religion. But here's where I want to draw a spiritual line for us when it comes to what's going on in our world. When we see 2 hurricanes in a row devastate communities, it should give us pause. Climate change can lead us to change ourselves. And that is a pretty spiritual comment because so many in the religious community have decided that affiliation with a pastor's acceptance is better than accepting what's happening in our world. And so many people are sharing stuff about weather machines and people controlling the weather, when all the while it's us who need to change. It's all of us who need to change. And that is a deeply internal thing that each and every one of us needs to do. Sometimes our religious affiliations sadly, are more important than the realities in front of us. It's more important that we look at and that we have our pastor's approval than it is to actually change. Like, our pastors sometimes will say things, and align with parties and things like that, and will deny science right in front of our face, all because it plays well in the pulpit. It gets the cheer. But the reality is that each and every person sitting in that room has someone in their life that's going to pay for the price of our misdeeds and our sins. And I say sins, and you never hear me use that term very frequently on this show. I should do a whole show on sin, but I believe in systemic failure. We as a society have failed the next generation. That is our sin. And we can choose to live in it, or we can choose to rise above it and try to live outside of that systemic failure. That is a deeply spiritual practice to say, you know what? Everyone's doing this. I'm going to do something else. It's a very spiritual practice. It is a spiritual practice for us to say, you know what? My religion being affiliated with a party is not the way my spirituality should be. In 1997, the Bush administration announced that they weren't going to abide by the Kyoto Protocol anymore. And that was aimed at fighting climate change. But our marriage of religion and politics, political parties, made it so that we were so unable to separate these two. We were so unable to separate our political ideology from the reality in front of us, our political and religious ideologies, because we wanted to be accepted. Because if we went against our pastor's idea of what is true spirituality and true Christian politics, we would be no longer accepted or an in crowd of our religion. Even though science is right in front of us. The UN had this committee of 300 scientists that just examined these data sets and looked at the Earth, and it warmed in 1 century it warmed like 0.3 to 0.6 degrees Celsius, which doesn't, you're like, oh, whatever, Joanna, whatever. I'm not a scientist, okay? I'm a theologian. But what I'm saying is that there's science that's backing, hey, we as a society have failed each other. This is our sin. Our spirituality should be able to look at that and say, hey, we're going to change. We're going to do better. That hurricane was not God's judgment. That was just us failing each other. It was failing each other. Why am I talking about all this stuff today? Why am I talking about Revelation and hurricanes and global warming? It's because my social media feeds are filled with them. People say, get off of social media. Well, this is where I do my work. This is where I connect with you. If only it was so easy to just unplug them and turn off. But for some, it's not a possibility for you to plug out, to turn it off and to get off of it and avoid it. But we have to protect ourselves. I've been in this kind of spiritual practice in the last couple of, I would say the last month of my life. I did a show, I think probably maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. I went through kind of a pretty serious spiritual re-traumatization. And it really made me start to think, what do I want to be about? Who do I want to advocate for? How do I want to live my life? And I realized that me trying to fight with the evangelical Christians in my life and try to combat the things I was hearing was just a waste of time. I'm not giving up. I'll never, ever stop advocating for people, especially LGBTQ people, that have access to their spirituality. But the reality is that it saddens me to watch so many people in my former religious communities fall for the brainwashing of their algorithms. It does. And it's my hope, and I began this spiritual cleansing of these voices in my life. I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes I go through these moments where I have to reevaluate my heart, my spirit, the inside of me, because I let things into my life that really, really hurt me. Where I think I'm doing good, but really what I'm doing is spinning my wheels and digging deeper holes. So I started, and if you've known me before, I'm very, very slow to hit the block button. But I've got to tell you, in the last 2 weeks of my life, I have been hitting the block button more than ever. And there's a reason for that. First of all, I don't know why my computer is so loud today. Can you hear it? But there's a reason. There are so many people in the world who will try to pull you into a debate through a meme, through a video shared. And what it does is disrupt your peace. Your peace, your inner peace. And I found myself over the last couple of months getting more and more drawn into a place of battle with others. It's why it's why on this podcast, why I actually stopped taking a lot of phone calls live on the air. Because I don't have to explain myself to you. I don't have to explain myself to anybody. Who I love, who I'm attracted to, that's just not up for debate anymore. And so for those of us who are, I'm an LGBTQ person, but if you're a spiritual person and you see things online that disrupt the peace in your spirit, I want to invite you today to know that it is okay to hit the block button and cast that out of your life. There have been people that I was friends with forever and ever and ever who this last week I just said, enough. I'm going to block you. And you want to know what happened? Yeah, my friend count went down just a little bit. But my spirit got more peaceful. So much more peace in my heart and in my spirit. Let alone the fact that, being a seminary student, I don't got time for all these arguments. But it created a much more peaceful existence for myself. And you can do that too. You, my dear friends, can find peace in blocking, in unfriending. And maybe if you're trying to live out some grace, maybe you just start muting people. But I've got to tell you, removing the voices of negativity in your life, removing the things that drain your spirit, are some of the most important things that you can do. I mean this. I've been doing this, and it has given me so much freedom. So much freedom. And I don't use that term lightly. The freedom is real. And yeah, you might pay for it financially sometimes. You might pay for it relationally. You might have one less place to go during the holidays because you said you're not going to let that negativity into your life anymore. But the peace the rest of the year is worth it. It's really, really worth it. Friends, as I don't go anywhere if you're on the live audience, I'm going to stay here on the line with you. But I said I've been changing the format of the show. And the last few weeks I've been playing for you one of my songs each and every week. And I'm going to end today with a song I released last Easter, during the Christian holiday of Easter, called Freedom. I hope that you find freedom in cutting out the voices that are draining your spirit. You can do it. I know you can, friends. I'm going to leave you with this song. It's called Freedom. You can go listen anywhere you get your music. Go to JOANNAWHALEY.com/music to find all music or stream it anywhere. Friends, thank you for joining me on the show this week. We will see you next time.
Does this grace about? It's in the love I'm made of. It's in the love I'm made of. We can sing of this love